and being present about those leadership. I wouldn't say I've learned a tremendous amount, and I still have a ways to go in leading, but all I can be is accessible and have an open ear. And so I think that starts with that. And I think, again, trying to create an atmosphere where there's open conversation, open dialogue, not an overreaction, because we're humans. We are going to screw up and make mistakes. I still do all the fertilizer apps on the golf course, and so the bulk stuff. And so I had a little bit of a faux pas last year, and that was on me. And so I did this today. It didn't turn out this way. They understand what the standards are. Eric Shoemaker wants it done this way. You're measuring against the standard. Okay, what is the standard? And so we never reach perfection, but we talk about the standards.
Welcome to Leadership on the Links, the podcast that showcases innovators in golf course management and the issues they face. I'm your host, Tyler Bloom. In Leadership on the Links, you hear the stories of people shaping the industry from their first swing to their dream match. You feel like you're on the course playing with your most inspiring colleagues, having great conversations, digging into insights and sharing a few laughs. Our industry is changing. As a leader, you need to keep up on everything from trends to technology to best practices. Together, we'll continue to build world-class clubs and teams. Let's get to it. Enjoy.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to be joined today by Eric Shoemaker, who many of you may know is, and make sure I'm right on this, the Director of Golf Course and Grounds at Wade Hampton. There's so many different titles today. I always have to try to double check, right?
Right. Too many.
Yes. So Eric and I were introduced, I was probably back in October or November. I really appreciate you reached out to just kind of get a knowledge of what our company does. And it's turned into a really fun relationship. We just got out of basically, I would call it 4 workshops with his assistants and really his entire management team at Wade Hampton, talking about a variety of things from team culture, resumes, best practices, employee engagement, communication, all sorts of different things. So I thought, it'd be really interesting to bring Eric on here after that, but more importantly, to really kind of shed a light on the things you're doing, because I think it does take a really strong leader and an awareness from their leader to kind of encourage their assistants to be a part of programs, whether it's myself, the GCSAA, your local regional chapters. And I thought that was such a really, really cool thing. And so without further ado, Eric, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your career and how you got to where you're at today, because you're at a pretty special property.
I am. It's been an interesting career. Always said once I decided to become a superintendent that I wanted to build a golf course. And quite honestly, I didn't know if I would stay in the superintendent or director's role until I retired. But I feel that's where I'm headed at this point, and love what I do. Certainly have a passion for what I do. Started in 1986 working at Linville Golf Club in Western North Carolina. When I was going to Appalachian State in college, worked there in the summers. It's interesting as well because my grandfather and great-grandfather helped build Linville Golf Club in the early 20s. It opened in 1924. It's a Donald Ross. A lot of history there. The club started in 1892. So and then worked with some great people there, worked there for 5 seasons as I was going to school. And it was really my junior year at Appalachian State when I said, this is what I want to do as a career. And so through an associate friend of mine who had been the senior assistant at Augusta National, who was at a club just down the road from where I grew up, he said, you should really think about going to Penn State if you want to go to a really good turf school. And so I pursued that. Got married in that time, and so finished school in 93, and did the internship at Augusta, and so it's been a great road for me. Again, I still have as big a passion for it today as I did back when I started, really in '86. But once 1988 got here, 1989, I really approached it from a different perspective because I knew that's what I was going to do as a long-term career. And so very, very blessed, great people. I love people. It's a great people business in this industry. Never met a stranger. People always willing to help, reach out. And so it's been a very rewarding career. I didn't go into it for financial reasons. Certainly I wanted to provide for my family, my wife, but really it's a passion that I had, and just still as passionate about it today as I was in the mid to late 80s for sure.
So it's been sort of like a family affair because your son as well now is an assistant for you. How did that, I'm kind of curious, like how did that, I don't know what you want to call it, like it's part of your DNA, like the industry is part of your DNA. What about it sort of like gravitated not only for you, but even your son now?
Yeah, I think part of it, Tyler, grew up in an ag background with my father. My family at one time owned a dairy farm in Western North Carolina, grew crops. And so I grew up around agriculture and being outside. And my dad was a golfer as well. And so he was a member of a semi-private club not far from where I grew up, was an avid golfer. And how he found time to golf and have a huge garden and do everything he did, full-time job, I still amazed by that. But so I grew up around the golf course. And so being outside, certainly I knew farming was not in my future, although I would have loved to have done that. But quite frankly, that was going to be from a property standpoint, it was so many developments. So it really wasn't feasible to really farm the way we needed to farm where we grew up. And so, yeah, it was really in my DNA. And certainly when Harrison, he was going to go to Clemson and major in landscape architecture. And he had worked with me at a previous mountaintop where I was previously to Wade Hampton. And so when COVID came around, I think it reset a lot of values for young kids in our country. And so he decided, Rook, this is really what I want to do is get back into the turf. And then he ended up going to Penn State, which was a great experience. Although the first year with COVID was tough, certainly he had a great experience there and certainly is doing very well, like a lot of young assistants that we had certainly here at Wade Hampton. Really pleased with that.
It's awesome to hear the Penn State connection, not to be biased on this podcast. I told you we live currently about an hour 15 east of Penn State, and we're actually going to be moving to Penn State in July. It was sort of unexpected, but I'm just curious to not to date yourself too much, but going back to those early days at Penn State, who were some of the influential people for you, during your school days?
Certainly, George Hamilton was over the program then. Dr. Duich had just retired, so I hate that I did not get to have him in the classroom. And in my first year, Don Waddington, the soil scientist that taught soils, was over the program. And then George came our second year. So it was a little bit of time of transition. But I would say, Tom Watchke, obviously, all those guys had a great role in my growth, educational growth. And even Joe Duich, even though I didn't have him, I became, through Monty Melton at Elk River, through their relationship at Augusta National, and Monty was there in the mid-'70s, I developed a great relationship with Dr. Duich. Was able to help him in the lab some when he was working on the A&G series, the new improved varieties of bentgrass there in the early 90s. So that was, he had a profound impact on me, even though I did not have him in the classroom. Worked with him a lot of Masters tournaments. I was fortunate enough to get to be with him most of the day as later in my career before his passing. So certainly he did, but I wouldn't take anything for my time at Penn State. And we are blessed in this industry to have some great turfgrass schools, be it North Carolina State, Michigan State, Horry, Georgetown, Texas A&M. We're really blessed to have some great people that we're bringing up that next generation from an educational standpoint.
Again, not to talk in like small world, but Dr. Watchke's significant other is now my realtor.
Oh, world.
She's helping us. Now, I may have been like extremely self-deprecating of myself in our first ride around different properties, but we had a blast. And I have to tell this really funny story. We were in this one neighborhood, and you could tell it in State College. It's on the eastern part of the area, and the houses were pretty modern and pretty swanky. And I said, "Did you ever see the movie Bridesmaids?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, this looks like where all the Helens live." And she just died laughing. And she was like, "Did you ever have Tom in school?" I said, "No." Right. And she's like, he would have loved having you." And I said, "Yeah, probably to pick on me all the time."
Oh yeah. Yeah. He was a very intimidating guy. My favorite Watchke line was he would walk into class. First thing he would say, "Do you have any questions for me today?" Of course, nobody would say anything. And he'd say, "Okay, put your books away. I've got some. Get a paper and pen. I've got some for you." That's the way he started most of the class was with a quiz or a test. And so he was pretty great guy. He really ingrained it into you, what he was trying to get across. Not as much it was his way, but it was a thought process, I think, that he really wanted you to think about what he was talking about. So yeah, he was great.
It's funny because I think of our sessions, and I thought you did a really good job of engaging with your assistants. more in terms of like to critically, to think critically. It's kind of the same thing as just, hey, you might have pushed a thought, but you kind of wanted to see what the other guys were thinking. And that's such a great mark of leadership. And what I see in today's superintendents that are really doing a great job with their teams is they're challenging them in a way that makes them think outside the box, makes them think critically versus just giving them the answer to the test. And even if they're maybe not on the same page, the fact that you just have the guys thinking maybe more on themselves independently, I think is a really cool trait. And
Right.
just kind of curious as you look at how you've built and designed your team and how they interact in the workforce today, what are things you try to impress upon assistants, in their growth?
Well, I think it goes back to what you just said. I think there's so many ways to do what we do to develop and get the product that we put out there for members and guests. And again, so many talented people. So, number one, I want them to understand that it's not Eric Shoemaker's way or the highway. It's not a dictatorial type of situation. I want their feedback. I want them to have confidence in what they're going to say, in their convictions. Obviously, they have a good education from their turf background. And so I want them to be able to rely on that. But this is real world. I think this is a learning lab. And so putting them in positions I think that they're uncomfortable in sometimes, I think leads to their growth. Certainly that's how I grow, and I still grow to this day. After almost 40 years in the industry, I still try to be in an uncomfortable situation because I can't get complacent. I have to continue to strive to get better. And so I think that's where they grow. And then really trust. I want them to know that I trust them to make decisions. You always want that, Eric, what do you think about this is the way I'm going to approach this issue or this management practice we're going to do on the golf course? What do you think about that? And we give them, feedback. And at the end of the day, they have to take ownership and responsibility for that. So, you build that relationship early on by spending time with them and creating that type of culture you want for your team, just really in the expectations that you want. And you really want them to take the ball and run with it. I certainly work for people that way. And, it's not all about X's and O's or what Joe Dewitt said or Fred Yelverton said in the classroom. It's, this, how can I apply to what they taught me to this current situation? And it is a thought process. It really is.
I was thinking you made a comment earlier that there was a pivotal point in your journey where you took things maybe a little bit more seriously. Can you capture what that moment was like and why, you decided to take it more seriously? Because as you said that, I was thinking of myself back at a young age of probably didn't take myself seriously enough as an assistant, as a turf professional. And it took sort of some areas in my life or professionally that I may have failed at to start saying, I need to take myself a little bit more seriously.
Right. I think probably for me was when certainly working with Monty Melton at Elk River Golf Club, and he made a comment to me one time, if you're going to go into this, obviously have a passion for it. But this was before I was getting ready to go to Augusta and do my internship and kind of what the expectations were, how that would be, and being an athlete growing up in high school and some in college was, okay, you're down by a point with less than 30 seconds, so you don't have the ball. You got to get the ball. And you got to, that competitive fire, I think. And so that said a lot to me as I approach things, certainly not to be a bull in a china shop, but to really think the thought process that I was going to have. And again, if I'm going to do anything, I want to do it well and do it the correct way. And so certainly I've learned through a lot of mistakes from my mistakes, not doing it the right, but you learn from that. But I think really just being a competitive person, I think, and I'm going to go into this, then I want to do the best that I possibly can do. Did I ever have aspirations that I wanted to be at a top 100 club? No, I didn't, but I knew that I want to get out of this career just as much as I possibly can. Really it's the people side of that too, I think is seeing young guys excel, grow, and see their success. That's very competitive for me. I want the guys that move on or guys that I know to put them in a position that they can go on and even further their careers better than say I have or, other people. So I want to see their success. And so it really goes back to that. Yeah, we're late in the game. We don't have the ball. We're behind. We got to get the ball. We got to score, and so that's really what drives you.
I'm laughing because about 3 weeks ago, I had a conversation with one of your mentors, I believe, Mr. Marsh Benson, and
Right.
not to name drop by any stretch, but I find it so fascinating how many different networks of superintendents, fortunate to get to meet. And when you start talking to guys that or gals that previously worked for them, and you can hear the messages and their approach, their leadership style come out in their assistants. And a comment that and again, that was my first interaction with Marsh one to one. And I walked away from that conversation of saying, this is probably one of the most thoughtful people I have ever met.
Mhm.
Just his calculated approach to anything that he does. And I see that now through other people that have either worked for him directly or Brad. There's that same sort of calculated strategic thought. And again, very,
Mhm.
very thoughtful. How did you
Mhm.
develop that skill set? Because I think that is something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but being able to have that thoughtfulness, and I don't know if I want to use the word discernment, but it's kind of
Mhm.
somewhere in between those two.
Right. I think it's certainly I learned that from Marsh. I think he's the greatest thinker in his thought process of anyone that I've ever been around, quite frankly, and so slow to speak sometimes. I learned that because early on, and still am to some point, I can be a little emotional at times when it hits the fan, so to speak, and how I react. So I've learned to through a guy like Marsh to approach it with, okay, let's step back and really take the time needed to think about, okay, the next step or and some things we have to react to very fast, but we really, as leaders, I think we have to put ourselves in a position through planning and execution. We try to eliminate all the things that we have to react to because there's going to be so many things that just come up working at a club or in an organization that somebody needs or something happens on the course that we have to react to immediately. So I think it's really through plan and execution in that thought process to step back and approach it versus trying to be so reactionary or off the cuff, fly off the handle. Like, early in my career, I think I could do. So I think with Marsh, there was nothing really that I ever saw that surprised him. And I think he was always prepared mentally, whether he had been in that situation or not, but he had already put himself mentally in that position to know how he was going to react, what the conversation was going to be, whether it could be something on the golf course or, as we know, managing people. I think working with people is the greatest challenge we have and those relationships. And I think he always approached that the right way and was a true Southern gentleman. I learned that very early on. And so you carry those things with you for the rest of your career, no question.
As you climbed up the ladder, I'm always interested in superintendents kind of get to, I don't want to say you're
Say number one, I think it's value relationships. The first gentleman that I ever worked with at Linville Golf Club, he grew up with my mom, grew up at Linville Golf Club, caddying, became the superintendent. I don't know for sure if he ever graduated high school, but he was an unbelievable professional in how he related to people. And he was on the golf course constantly. He knew who his customer was and the members at Linville Golf Clubs. Me being an 18, 19-year-old kid, eating, push mowing, doing all the mundane tasks that we have to do on the golf course. Thank God I was smart enough to pay attention to how he interacted with people. Really, I think that's one of the the greatest things that I learned early on, probably the most significant. And it's like Joe Dewich would always say. He said 80 to 90% of what we do is not turf grass related. It's truly about working with people and relationships. And I find that so true. And so I would say that there's not been one person that I've worked with versus just working on the staff or being an assistant or my first years in the industry that I haven't taken something from. I've worked with people that are very different than I am as well, which is a good thing. And so our values may be a little different or our approach to things may be different. But that's been a good thing for me. So really all those people have impacted Eric Shoemaker in his career in some form or fashion. And quite frankly, they're still doing that today. Certainly, I did this. We talked about this professional development initiative working with you and your group, and that was for the assistants, but I took a great deal out of that as well. I wanted to be in on those meetings. I listened. It challenges me. We use a phrase here at Wade Hampton, iron sharpens iron, and we just want to be, we want to be pulling each other along and developing that next guy. And so as a leader, I need to be doing those and engaging in those things as well.
I loved it because I'm laughing as you said that because I think it was after the first week, Mary on my team, she said, "Hey, I think you might need to do a little prep work because I think Eric's going to be pretty engaging with you on this. You might be you might be doing a workshop more specifically with Eric than anybody." And I just
Right.
laughed. Yeah, I'm going to have to be on my toes a little bit here. It's good.
No, it was great, and hopefully I didn't talk too much.
I loved it. I loved it because it brought different ideas for me. And really the whole premise around that program was to help the superintendent, our philosophy is it's helping the superintendent engage with their assistants, right? Sometimes it's not always about what the topic is or the key takeaways. It's just having and being in a room, having a conversation. And I think back to my days as an assistant, some of the best learning moments were at the end of the day, sitting in the chair, and we would have different vendors stop by, consultants, academics, whatever the case may be. It could be members, and you learn a lot just by sitting and listening and being in that room. And I totally took that for granted as a young up and comer. And, that's what I enjoy about doing these sort of professional development workshops because it makes me kind of get, I hate to say it's like humbling, but you're rooted back into what got you into this industry and sort of being in that room to help facilitate that. I think it's such a cool thing. And talk a little bit more of when you think of like the professional development at Wade Hampton. What does that look like for you? What are some of the things you guys have been doing, in the past to engage your assistants?
Well, I think again, you have to be intentional about leading people. I think you can't hide from that. Being and I'm not saying talking all the time. I think just being present is a sign of leadership and being intentional on that. Something we try to do here when we have a new assistant or a new key staff person come on. I really want to understand what their values are as a person. So I've used John Maxwell's leadership value cards, and it could be, faith, family, fun. There's about 50 cards. And so of different things that they value, they have to pick three of those that they're top three or 3 to 5. And so I learn a tremendous amount about someone, and it could be from, say, for instance, one of our senior assistants from Pennsylvania. But one of the things I learned about him early on here at Wade Hampton was he values his time with his family. And so when he comes up and asks me for a week off in June to go to the beach with them, I understand that's important to him because he doesn't get to see his family in Pennsylvania because he's here. And so, okay, he's not asking during a tournament and it's next guy up while he's gone. We can cover that. That's why you have a great team. And it really helps me learn about these guys and again, what they value. And so as they're asking me questions, okay, trust is very important to this assistant. So I've got to give it to him straight. He has to trust me or, family, his family or he values integrity. And so that has been a great thing for us. I think putting positions, all the guys want more leadership as assistants. And so we developed a few years ago a manager of the week. And so it's a defined job description. And that assistant for the week, they take turns and they are truly the manager. So from the scheduling to the boots on the ground to managing the staff to coming up from their first job, the staff's first job to their second job, it's on the board, it's done. We meet a lot. So like you said a moment ago, sitting around in the bullpen before we go in the afternoon, we spend 10 minutes talking about good things of the day, the things that didn't get done, and what we really need to do tomorrow. Do the pin sheet, set up any irrigation needs, any chemical apps, those sheets are done. So it gives us those time. We really approach it when we come in the next day. We don't want any surprises unless there was a weather event. That schedule is done, and we can enjoy the morning talking about, North Carolina basketball or the lack thereof, or Clemson football or North Carolina State, whatever's going on in the sports world. So thing that's been a great value here as well is I've tried to get the members involved with mentoring these guys. So we started a couple of years ago. I call it a lunch and learn. And so maybe 4 or 5 times a year, I'll ask a member to come down. We'll have some barbecue or something. And then I've given them some conversation points to have. And it's been a great learning experience because obviously these membership has been very successful in their endeavors and whatever that they've chosen to do. And so we've learned a tremendous amount. And again, I think one of the biggest take homes from that I've learned too is just the people and the relationships that they worked and learned and valued, quite frankly, to be successful in their business, And so And we watch, like was told about Steve McDonald, his weekly videos last year. And so that's been a great thing because even though he's in the Northeast, we watch his video every Friday at our Friday manager meeting. Spend 20 minutes, and it's amazing. We feel like he's talking about Wade Hampton, though he's never stepped foot on the properties. It's a culmination of everything. And again, I think you have to be intentional about and being present about those leadership. I wouldn't say I've learned a tremendous amount, and I still have a ways to go in leading, but all I can be is accessible and have an open ear. And so I think that starts with that.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I feel like our world collided was our agronomist when I was a superintendent, and I also subscribed to his weekly videos for the same exact reason of like, not even on a golf course. I just love to kind of stay in tune, and Steve's is about as good as you can get in the country,
Right.
in terms of agronomic observations, knowledge. I mean, and he's super practical. I mean, it's so approachable individual. So it's really funny to hear. And kudos to you guys for doing that because, I mean, like you said, he's never been to Wade Hampton. He's not local to you, but that's such a great resource for your team. Something I picked up on too, as you were describing that, because you have those sort of like daily huddles, you kind of described it, the bullpen. I imagine that it helps kind of diffuse, or I don't know what's the right word I want to use, disalarm your team from when bad situations do come up. A mistake happens, that they're probably a lot more comfortable because it's more of a routine that they have conversations with you, the other assistants, and kind of curious if you see that, in those kind of week to week huddles. Because I think that as a young assistant, I look back, dealing with failure and dealing with having to manage up and tell your boss that, something didn't go to plan is not an easy thing. And it's a skill that takes time to develop. So I'm kind of curious if you see that in those kind of weekly, daily huddle.
Yeah, we do. And I think, again, trying to create an atmosphere where there's open conversation, open dialogue, not an overreaction, because we're humans. We are going to screw up and make mistakes. Certainly, I still do all the fertilizer apps on the golf course. And so the bulk stuff. And so, I had a little bit of a faux pas last year. And that was on me. And so I think, we talked about that, and certainly trying to create that atmosphere where, okay, I did this today, it didn't turn out this way. They understand what the standards are. It's not Eric Shoemaker wants it done this way. You're measuring against the standard. Okay, what is the standard? And so we never reach perfection, but we talk about the standards and again, trying to get to that standard. And so I think even it may not be that, okay, they did something that was detrimental to turf or to a relationship, but it can be, I didn't meet the standard today. It's still pretty dang good, but I didn't meet the standard. And so I think the guys are good about that. And so again, from a leader's perspective, myself or Greg Burleson, who's unbelievable guy, the most even kill guy, worked with Marsh as well as a superintendent here. He's not going to overreact. I'm learning and have learned just to diffuse the situation and let's talk about it. And so the guys, I think I've seen that growth because now we have some assistants that have been here, from 3 to 4 years, and 2 or 3 years ago, they wouldn't have said anything. And the last couple years or year and a half, they've really been more forthright in coming forward and saying, look, this happened with one of the staff members. This is how I dealt with it. And right, wrong, or indifferent, they handled that. And that's really what we're looking for. And that's what their growth is all about, quite frankly.
I love it. We just went through an exercise internally on our team where we're switching over operating systems, and what we realized pretty quick was there was an issue with, we were promised something that really wasn't what we signed up for, and it was a learning moment as a team to just kind of say, hey, if it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Let's kill it while it's small before it becomes something bigger. And I heard that just in what you just described there. Like, I'm not going to get upset when something looks wrong. We got to address it quickly. So again, not to keep singing your praises, but kudos to you for self-admitting maybe some of your own flaws and challenges, and makes your team comfortable.
Right.
Talk about what I found fascinating as well working with your team is the fact that it's not like you have just local people in North Carolina that are coming there. You have guys that have come from different parts of the country. give a little bit of background on your assistants, and even Greg is not. I don't think he's local either, is he?
No, he's from North Carolina, but he was at Augusta Country Club for 25 years, certified superintendent. And, as we see in our industry, some clubs choose to go a different way. And so he was in the unfortunate position that happened. And so I had an opportunity. I'd only been to Wade Hampton. I started December 1st of 2018, right after Christmas, as I heard about this, and I had the opportunity to get Greg to come. And I think one of the greatest things, because we had a young man as the superintendent here, and I still remember this conversation, and he since left to go to a club just about 30 minutes from here down in South Carolina, doing an unbelievable job. But when I was thinking about talking to Greg, I brought this young man in and I said, look, this is what I'm thinking. But before I do this, I want to have this conversation with you. How do you feel about this? Because he would be brought in as a peer. His title would be superintendent as yourself. And his response was the most mature response. He said, I'm all about it. I think it would be great. I just want to be challenged and keep doing what I'm doing and learn from Greg just as much as I do you. And that spoke volumes to me, to this young man's maturity. And then 2 years later, he got an opportunity and left. And that's the kind of the makeup really of the guys. There was a great team when I got here. And so Larry, our senior assistant's from Pennsylvania, Rutgers guy, and he's the last one left since I've came. And so certainly he'll be moving on probably at some point in the future, certainly ready to do that. And so you're looking who's next man up, so we have two young men from North Carolina State, one from Raleigh and one from Greensboro. One of those young men, Clay Lawrence, his dad is the superintendent in Raleigh as well. So it's nice having that DNA in his bloodline. He grew up as well. And then Bryce Wagner from Greensboro just lost an assistant to Pete Went up at Congressional, and certainly it's a great opportunity for him. He was here. He's from Tennessee, grew up in Atlanta, and so he's got a great opportunity there, and we're certainly happy that he was able to do that. And then Josh Skinner, another young man that's been here 2.5 years. He drives an hour every day up the mountain to work. And so he went to Rutgers as well, worked with the Cliffs communities. And so, but I'm all the time. And Harrison, my son, he's just a few minutes away. And that's, that's, people ask me, well, how is it working with your son? Be honest with you, I don't have a lot of daily interaction with him, and some of that's intentional. But Greg is such a strong leader and so hands-on with these guys. He's a great mentor to them as well, probably boots on the ground in a lot of ways better than I am. And so, I think that's a great thing. So the dynamic of our team is interesting because guys have different strengths and abilities, and we try to put them, certainly it's easy to put people in their areas of strength, but we try to put them where they're weak too, just really so they can grow. And so, because there's so many ways, again, to do what we do, challenges ahead, guys, but every one of them I know have the ability to take that next step when they leave here. That's what I want for them as well.
What you're saying is the dynamic's not like Coach Prime and Shador in Colorado?
No, try not to go that route for sure. So that's been an interesting few weeks there for sure.
Yeah, I just got it totally random. I get like spammed with all this like Instagram and Twitter stuff, and there was a thing that came out this morning. It was like Coach Prime's heading to Cleveland as the quarterbacks coach. It was totally like a spam, one of those
Right.
spam things.
Yeah.
When you talk about Wade Hampton to potential candidates, interns, AITs, what do you tell them about Wade Hampton? Because it does have a little bit of exclusivity around it, and privacy that, maybe from an outside looking in, maybe people don't know as much about. So what do you try to impress upon people about Wade Hampton?
I think, and we typically have one or two interns a year. Or, I'm not going to replace Mitch's position right now. I'll probably start looking this fall to do that. But number one, we try to get them to understand early on that they're going to be part of a team, and they have to grasp that team concept, team culture, working within a group, adding the value to that group. And they're working for a great membership. I will say we're a little remote. That's one of the good things, is we're a little hard to get to. And one of the bad things is we're a little hard to get to. So it goes both ways. And so the culture from the membership, it's all about the golf here. And so we have no fitness, no tennis, no pool. It is strictly just the golf. And so that's their focus. And so we use that to our advantage. And so from a standpoint of resources and the greatest resource we have is the people that come through these doors every day. But whether that's equipment or we just build a new shop. And so we need that to really manage the golf course to the degree that we're trying to achieve. And so I think they're going to be working with a great membership. They're going to be exposed to a lot, and quite frankly, I think one of the greatest challenges in this area is the climate, and particularly the rainfall that we can get. How do you manage high turf grass quality with potentially over 100 inches of rain a year like we can get? Quite frankly, then how do you manage it? We've seen it where we've had a half inch in 55 days over the years too. Those extremes, I think, and that certainly challenges you in your learning process and your thought process when you're going through those extremes. So really, I think the biggest thing is, particularly interns, I tell those guys, look, you'll be involved in every afternoon meeting. You'll be involved in every Friday meeting. And really, we put it on, they're going to get as much out of this as they want to because they're exposed to everything from spraying to fertility. I try to share budget information with the guys and help them because, at the end of the day, Tyler, as you well know, it is a business. It all comes back to money at times. And so we have to manage. It's incumbent upon us as the golf management staff to manage the club's resources to a high degree financially, whether that's a capital project, $1,000 capital project, or a $2 million capital project, or, if your budget's, it doesn't matter what your budget is. And so you have to account for every dollar. So we try to get that across as well, that, again, it's a business, and they're at the bottom line, the members want to see the value in the dollars that they're spending here for sure. So really exposed, it's a big ball, and then we take bits and pieces, and you really see what young assistants or interns are going to gravitate to. And so we try to, certainly keep them interested in those areas. And we ask them, what do you want to learn when you're here? That's a conversation that's had pretty early on. Tell us what you're wanting to get out of your 3 months here, 6 months here, or quite frankly, if you come on as assistant, you're 2, 3, 4 years here. What do you want to get out of that?
I think that's really awesome that you asked them that question. We just recently did an assistant superintendent survey, and I thought there was a lot of really cool takeaways. One of them, which is that by and large, 80% of assistants are looking to become golf course superintendents, but their biggest challenge is they don't know how to get to that next step, right?
Right.
And so I've been really trying to educate and work with some of the employer partners that we work with, that I think very different than maybe one probably, listen, I'm not that old. I'm 30. I just turned 37. No, I just turned 38. Excuse me. Apologize. My wife would remind me of that.
Yeah, it's easy for us to forget.
Yeah. So very different than I think when you and I came up through the ranks, is that you kind of observed and watched what was the steps to take, right? And you kind of followed the order, and that's how you learned. I think today's generation kind of wants more direction. They need a little bit more education on the career path. What are the right steps to take?
Right.
Things of that nature. And it sounds like you guys have done a really nice job of incorporating that, incorporating and asking their questions, but also educating them on, what your observations are of what it takes to kind of get to the next step.
Well, and again, I'm not blowing smoke to Tyler Bloom or your partners and your organization, but really what got me to thinking is I started seeing more about what you're doing in publications and social media, those type things. And then we went to the Carolina show this year, and our assistants went to that, and I heard that you sponsored that. And so that got, because I feel like I don't do enough. I can prepare these guys to do the job, but I don't know that I can prepare them to take those next steps from a portfolio standpoint, from a resume standpoint, from some of the other things that you see in your endeavors as you travel the country and conversations you have. I don't know that I could prepare them for that. And so it's more of a challenge for me. So therefore, have the opportunity. And that's why I reached out to you and said, look, what do you think about having these sessions? And you develop these relationship with these guys. And so because it's a small investment, and I don't think you can ever waste money on investing in people. that are truly sincere. And so it's not a huge investment for us to take, but I think the growth and the outcome, the appreciation is far exceeds any monetary value. And so that's been the biggest benefit for us. And again, this is not blowing smoke up your behind, as we're sitting here talking, but it's the truth. And, that's how we approach things, and that's how it came to fruition for us to get you involved here at the club.
It's funny, man. I was thinking about this morning about the Carolinas conference this upcoming November. And, as any business owner, you're going to look at what you're investing into and what does that come out of things like sponsoring an assistance event, things of that nature. And I always look at things not just in a 1 year kind of time frame. You got to look at it 2, 3, 4 years and what's the maturation of that sort of relationship. And I was thinking exactly of what you just said, because I remember meeting Harrison and I think maybe one or two of your other guys at that association event. They didn't know me any different than, some other industry supplier maybe, right? But then to fast forward it to those conversations and the workshops that we just did, I thought, man, like that, if I impact one person, that is worth everything, to me. Like, it's not about having thousands of followers or 100 likes per post, but if I make one impact, that is worth the value of what we're doing. So
Right.
I really appreciate that, because I think you probably see it too, of like, if those things are important to your company culture and that's the value of who you want to surround yourself with, like, those things are going to come, they're going to come to you. They just naturally come to you. I
Right.
don't know. It's been a weird kind of dynamic. Sometimes I say that to our team. A lot of times, like, the relationships that we build with, whether it's employers, whether it's other service providers, street people, by and large, it circles around the same core values that we have as a company. Professional development is one of them, continuing
Hmm.
education, right?
Hmm.
And creating great workplace cultures with our clients, I think it's something that keeps me fired up, and keeps
Right.
me engaged in what I'm doing, because that's really what I love doing. So I appreciate the
Yeah, absolutely. I think it truly says and there's a lot of clubs that do this, a lot of organizations that do this type stuff. And, but it says, as I'm asking them to go out there and it's 20 degrees outside and had snowed, or it's 35 and raining in the wintertime and we've had projects going on, at the end of the day, we've got to get the work done. But things like this, creating that type of culture, I think helps them to understand that you truly care about their growth. You don't just care about using them and abusing them. I mean, John Zimmers and I had a conversation years ago about we're our own worst enemy. We try to get young people to come into the business, and then we work, 90 hours to 110 hours a week. And, quality of life means something to, I think certainly it does me, but certainly the younger generation, to where they want some things outside of work as well. I think that's important. And so, and I think they see these type things that we try to do, ancillary things, and they do appreciate it. And they understand it. It's not just about hitting the whip and, punching that clock and doing the things just to get the job done. I truly care about that individual and want to see their growth, I think and they appreciate that.
Oh, you'll get a good kick out of this. But I think about time, how much time, my perspective of time has changed, now than it was coming up through the ranks. And what you just said about just showing a little bit of appreciation to the staff for asking them to spend a holiday afternoon, 4th of July, ham, water, and greens when
Hmm.
it's 90 some degrees out, right? And I
Right.
remember, again, I think as a young assistant, you probably don't have that perspective of time and appreciation, because I certainly took for granted those opportunities that were presented to me at such a young age, and I took them for granted, and
Hmm.
I try to really educate today's assistants about, don't take for granted the opportunities that are presented to you, because at some point you're going to look back and say, did I take it and run, or did I just passively walk through my career? And the opportunity is now. And
Hmm.
I think back to one example. John brought me to I think it was like a Western PA Sports Hall of Fame dinner that he was invited to, him, Tracy, and then he asked me to come along. And yeah, I got to meet Johnny Majors,
Hmm.
longtime University of Pitt
Right.
coach. And again, does that have anything to do with my career at this standpoint? Probably not. But you look back at things like that, and I totally took for granted and said, well, this is just what is expected. But it's certainly not. And
Right.
so I'm giving you, again, kudos to spending that time, because a lot of us superintendents don't. They
Hmm.
just unfortunately treat their assistants or interns almost like well, this is what you should be doing. It's a job. And I find like that little extra bit goes such a long way. And it's not to guilt people,
Mhm.
it's not to guilt them
Right.
it's not
Right.
to guilt them at those points. It's just, hey, these are the things that I know, you're going to sacrifice at some point during this year. So if I can give that back to you at another point. So
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's just because Eric Shoemaker, Greg Burleson, or Wade Hampton does something a certain way doesn't make it the right way. And so, certainly that's what we believe. That's the culture we're trying to create. And so that's the path we're on. But like I said, there's so many paths and they're not wrong paths. It's just, different strokes for different folks, as the saying goes. And so I have so much respect for people in this industry, and because there are so many different ways to achieve some of the standards that we try to achieve for sure.
well, my last segment here I like to call chip shots, and it's a little bit more lighthearted rapid
Mhm.
fire. So we'll see what we can bring here today. I always like to start off with this question: is if you had to pick a favorite foursome, who would it be with, and where would it be at?
For sure, my dad would be in that group. He passed away a couple of years ago, but certainly my dad, probably Brent Thompson, who's a superintendent up at Silo Ridge up in New York, who's a former superintendent that I worked with at Mountaintop. And the last one's it's pretty good. Maybe, I don't know, if I'd love if Jesus played golf. I'd love to have him in the group. So I think that would be a pretty interesting group. And I would have to say it'd probably have to be at Augusta, affinity for there. But I mean, I could just as easily say Wade Hampton. I could easily say Oakmont for, Cyprus, some of the places I've got to see, been for Shinnecock over the years. So it'd be hard to pick a spot, but I'd say probably Augusta would be at the top.
Eric, you might be the only person that ever said Jesus would be in your favorite foursome. So I love it. That's awesome.
It would keep me on my best behavior, I'm sure.
I
Sure.
love that. I love
Yeah.
that. What's your favorite halfway house food, and where at?
I would have to say just working with Discovery Land Company, the amenities that's really what they're known for. And so the beef jerky at Mountaintop is second to none. I mean, I've seen blurbs about it in Golf Digest before. So if you come to Cashers, we'll have to make a side trip to Mountaintop and try that beef jerky because there's nothing like it. So still remember out at the Madison Club in Palm Springs, they had the margarita bar. That was pretty good too. It was pretty special. So I would say it's definitely from a Discovery Club for sure.
Well, I'm laughing here and thinking, man, I need to come on a golf trip with you. You got Jesus playing in your foursome, and those are two halfway house items I've not heard anybody say.
Right,
So
right.
make
Yeah.
sure anybody that's listening, Eric Shoemaker's in your foursome, and he's organizing travel plans.
Okay, I can do that. My
Oh,
wife will tell you I'm good at that.
I love it. I love it. If there was a go-to leadership book that you kind of recommend to your assistants or others, what would it be?
I would say, probably John Maxwell, Principles of Leadership. Certainly, again, I think the values, leadership values that he talks about, I think, certainly Stephen Covey, I know, and I'll have to readily admit too, I'm not a huge reader, and I know that is a huge negative for me and a challenge for me that I'm trying to read more. So those books, the Stephen Covey couple books that I've read with him and the John Maxwell books, have really had a big impact on my leadership as well.
Yeah, well, I've read and listened to both. So little side hack for you to TB hack. There's a app called Blinkist. All right. And
Okay.
it's basically Cliff Notes version of books. So you can listen to it, you can
I
read it.
definitely need that.
Yeah.
College, that was my best friend, Cliff Notes.
Well, as my one of my marquee sayings is, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So
Right, right. Yeah,
that's my cheat code. So
yeah, for sure.
if people want to get to know you, they want to find you, where can they look you up?
Certainly on the GCSA website, Carolina's Wade Hampton. So I love, again, because of where we are, we don't get a whole lot of traffic, but I love when a superintendent may be vacationing in the area, say we'd like to come by and see the facility, see the golf course, potentially play. We try to work that out. So, via email, cell phone, but I'm here most every day in the summer. And so easily accessible when you're in the area. And again, I just like meeting new people, developing those relationships. I'm always interested in that for sure.
Well, I
And then
appreciate
I'm on Instagram, Facebook. Unfortunately, I'm not on X, Twitter or X and those type things. haven't delved into that. I feel like I've got enough things that pull me away from what I should be focusing on, and so I try to dove into that.
Stay clear. I mean, if there's two platforms I'd recommend right now would be LinkedIn and then Instagram. And Instagram
Hmm.
probably more for viewership of just, different things turf related, people posting pictures, videos. We all always support the Turf Today account. I always find pretty fascinating to see all over the world
Hmm.
sharing photos of their golf courses. So I love that account.
Right.
And then LinkedIn obviously has become more prominent within the superintendent community. So
Right. Right.
but, well, I appreciate you jumping on, and it's like I said, it's been fun getting to learn more about your team, your culture, and again, anybody that's listening, if you really want a good model for how to build your team and create a good workplace culture for people, absolutely hit up Eric, because you guys have done a really fantastic job there, and appreciate the opportunity to work with you guys.
Well, thank you very much, Tyler. It's a work in progress, as such as life is as well. And so, but again, we appreciate what you've brought to our team. Look forward to doing some more things in the future, and appreciate this time. Thank you very much.
All right, buddy.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Leadership on the Links. For more leadership insights and industry expertise, connect with us at bloomgolfpartners.com or follow us on social media sites LinkedIn and Instagram. If you enjoyed this episode of Leadership on the Links, we'd be thrilled if you'd leave a review or share it with someone who you know would get some value. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to stay updated. Thanks for joining us today.